From the edge of tragedy to the pinnacle of triumph, today's guest is nothing short of extraordinary. Mark Colbourne MBE is a Paralympic cycling champion who went from breaking his back in a paragliding accident in 2009 to breaking world records at the London 2012 Paralympic Games. With two silver medals and a gold under his belt, Mark's story is one of resilience, elite mindset, and unwavering determination. Now, as a high performance coach and speaker, he is helping individuals and teams around the world conquer their own fears and limits, both on the bike and in life. Get ready to be inspired by a true champion. Welcome to the show, Mark Colbourne. Hi, Mark. Welcome to my podcast.
Hi,
How are you?
Vibhor. I'm very good. Yes, pleasure to meet you again, and hope everything is good with you.
Yeah, everything is fine. So, it's an honor actually to have you on my podcast. I saw your profile and everything, and you had such a great achievement in your life, especially when you met that accident. After that accident, that 5 years, those were the glorious years, and what you did in your Paralympics London 2000, I think 2012 event. Okay, so you won one gold medal and two silver medals in the same event, and then breaking two world records. And you are a Paralympic cycling champion, and now you are living in Dubai as an
That's correct.
executive
Yes.
coach, cycling coach, and conference speaker, international conference speaker. Wow, what a great career.
Yes,
So,
it's been an incredible journey,
yes,
and I guess there were times where I didn't think there would be a future. I didn't think that there would be any kind of life, but it just comes to show, I guess, the true spirit, of the human, the human brain and the human heart, you know.
that's what I found in your, particularly in your case, Mark, because I got an opportunity to meet uh, and talk some Paralympic champions and people, but the way you recovered and you won gold medal and all these medals, so fast recovery and mentally and physically you won those medals, and you what I understood that you were not a cyclist before this accident that happened. Okay, so it is rare, it is very rare, that kind of achievement you did in just 3 4 years. That was superb. So I want to know, Mark, what was your life before that accident happened in 2009? Am I right? In 2009, that accident
Yes,
happened.
yes. It
So, what
was
was your
the
life? How were you living that
it,
your
it
life?
was the 2nd of May 2009. And I guess, it's a great question to kick off this podcast. And, first and foremost, thank you for inviting me. Obviously it's a pleasure to meet your audience, whether it's obviously by audio or obviously by video, as well. So I guess, what kind of life were I living, before my paragliding accident? Well, if I take your audience back, to 2009, I was actually living in the capital of Wales, which is the country, where I'm actually from. And my profession, I was a senior accounts manager working for a PLC company. And it was the kind of job where, we had lots of accounts that, and customers that we looked after, with sales and marketing. And life was great because I worked Monday to Friday. I had weekends off then, and the weekends for me were racing, triathlon. I was a keen rock climber and also a keen paraglider. And I guess for me, just coming from a normal, and I mean this, a normal working class background, my parents were working class. We didn't have much money, and we literally lived almost month to month, and I say that quite proudly because the one thing that I had apart from freedom was just unconditional love, unconditional care, from my parents. So I guess it was a great time, a great time in my life. And yeah, I guess we all think, that we're sort of almost bomb-proof, is the word I'm going to use because we go through life, thinking that we're untouchable, So yeah, it was just a normal life enjoying sport, and obviously very healthy as well. So so that was the start,
What was
that was
your
the
age
start of
when
the
you met that
journey,
accident? What
you
was
know.
your age when you met that accident?
So I was 40, I was 40
40.
years of age, and they say that life begins at 40, and it certainly
Yeah.
did for me, it certainly did. But yeah, the accident was, I suppose, something that, it was just, I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time,
Right.
because obviously accidents do happen.
Mm.
And and thankfully, that afternoon, I wasn't taken away by his Lord, by the grace of God. He spared me, shall we say, you know. So so yeah, it was not a nice experience, but I guess it opened the door, for me to become, one day that Paralympic athlete.
Can you describe, Mark, if it's okay with you, what happened exactly that day?
Yeah, so as I said, I was a keen paragliding pilot, and I was flying above the South Wales coast with a paragliding club. Conditions were perfect, blue skies, strong wind, nothing too severe, and we'd probably flown for about maybe, I don't know, maybe 4.5, 5 hours all day, in sort of 20 minute, 15-minute slots. And unfortunately, around 5:15 p.m., I was flying above 40 feet above the ground, or 15 meters. And unfortunately, I flew into what is known as a crosswind, which is basically two air streams that, fight for the same space. And what happened is that it actually, it blew out the actual paragliding canopy. So I had what they call a full collapse. Now, if I'd been maybe 500 feet above the ground, I would have been able to have reinflated the canopy. But because I was so low, around that 15 meters, the canopy just blew out, and within 2 seconds, I'd literally landed, on the grass feet first with probably an almighty thud. And not realizing, at that point exactly what had happened. And then some of the paragliding pilots came to the rescue, and they radioed for the air ambulance, who thankfully arrived within about 10 or 11 minutes, and then
Wow. Oh,
stabilized me and then airlifted me off, to the local hospital. So you can imagine arriving in hospital that night, totally paralyzed from the waist down, no movement, no feeling, and just thinking to myself, my first thoughts were, maybe I've just broke both my legs because there was no movement, as I said, no feeling, just totally paralyzed. And it was that night that I had, the X-ray and the MRI scan in hospital to be told, that night that unfortunately I'd broken my back. And I kept thinking to myself, did the doctor just say that I've broken my back? Because you never think, that kind of severe accident or severe injury would happen, you know. Um, but yeah, that night I got told that I'd broken my back, and and I guess the first feelings were of just denial and shock and anger, because as human beings we always want to turn back the clock, But in this case, it was just, it was impossible, you know.
so how long did you stay in that same hospital?
So I got taken to the first emergency hospital, and then the next
Okay.
day I got transferred to the hospital in the capital in Cardiff, the University Hospital, and
Okay.
was told that they couldn't operate for at least a week because my spinal cord was so swollen. and they couldn't run the risk of operating. So I had to wait a week before I had, spinal surgery. And, I had six titanium pins inserted into my spine, which are actually still here today.
Oh,
They're still in my back today. So,
okay.
so it just comes to show, the incredible work of, the consultants and the surgeons and science, especially,
Okay, so you stayed for I think for more than a month, or uh, I think around 3 months you stayed in the hospital.
So I was in the rehabilitation hospital for 6 months, but
Okay, six
I
months.
actually spent 3 months on my back because they couldn't run the risk of, moving me or allowing me to stand up, to put pressure on the spine. So I had well, in fact, it was 94 days. And as you can imagine, I've shared this story, this memory, many, many times. And I'll
Yeah,
never forget standing up for the very first time after 94 days and just thinking to myself, this is crazy, but it's much better to be standing up than lying down. And that was literally the very first steps on my journey, to rehabilitation.
right, Mark. So, Mark, when you met that accident, were you conscious that time, like when doctors told you? So you were aware about the kind of injury you had? Oh, it is not easy. What kind of things have gone through you have gone in this that time? So, Mark, when did you decide to become to start a new career in cycling and go to Paralympic?
Yes, well, it definitely wasn't the day after I left hospital, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Um, I guess, um, the fast forward of the journey, having left hospital and then spent, probably the best part of 5 or 6 months just settling back into, normality. Because coming from a controlled environment in the hospital where everything is flat, there's no stairs, there's no steps, um, to now having to, I suppose, reprogram, the brain and, the muscles to deal with, slopes, stairs, escalators, which were a new experience for me. And and after maybe probably 3 months after leaving hospital, I needed to get back into exercise. And at the time I'd been going to the velodrome in South Wales. So I had a cycling coach who was a disabled cycling coach who allowed me to participate, in cycling, albeit with a disability, because what I've been left with is what they call lower leg paralysis, which basically means only half of the muscles in my legs work because of nerve damage, okay, in the spinal cord. So,
okay.
so I started training, and then the coach said one day, "Would you like to maybe enter in in an international cycling race in the velodrome?" And immediately I said yes. Not thinking if I could do it, but I just thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. I was, as I said, 40 years of age at the time, and I was sensible enough not to be crazy. And and lo and behold, the two races that I entered, I won them both, which is crazy. So
Yeah,
so the coach was really supportive, and we're still best friends now. This is literally, 15, 16 years on, and we're still really close friends. So,
that's
so to answer your question, it was, it was probably, I would say, well over a year after making that decision, after, my accident,
okay.
to, to maybe, and I mean this, just maybe, commit. I didn't go back to work, to maybe commit to train full time, to give up all of the earnings, all of the income, the company car, the salary, to to just, I suppose, work towards a dream that was always a desire, but didn't think it was possible. But I suppose the accident allowed me, to have that dream once again, and it was June 2010 where I said to my parents, I'm gonna commit, to the London 2012 Paralympic Games. And both my parents thought I was crazy. So which is understandable because they care, they cared about me. So that was when the decision was made, June 2011, 2010, and that's when the training started, you know.
Great. So, how did you find that motivation, Mark? Because for an entire year you were recovering from that injury, okay, and everything is a new was a new experience for you when you came back to your home and using stairs and all these things. So how did you
Mm.
find that motive? Because many people just gave up that time, and you were like, it was not even before making the decision that you want to choose a new career in cycling. Okay, so
Yeah,
how
yeah,
did you
yeah,
find that
very
daily
true.
motivation? Because it is very important for the audience, that especially youngsters who
Mm.
lose hope in just very, very small things. There some
Yeah.
bad thing happen and they lose hope. Even
Mm.
some people commit suicide. Such things we have seen every day. And you
Yeah.
were like a role model for everyone. That what you
I,
did, what was your system? We
I
want to know
think
what you did exactly
I
to
think there's one simple answer. I think it's because that I've just had this mindset all my life. Okay, as a child, I loved sport. As a teenager, I probably fell off my bike as much as I rode it. And I guess well, my late parents used to say that Mark doesn't have a stop button. Okay. I've never had that feeling of, I suppose, saying no to myself. Okay. And as I said, as long as I was safe, okay, then there was nothing to stop me because there's a great quote that's just come to mind by Michael Jordan, who's the famous basketball player,
yeah,
that says, I can accept failure because everyone fails at something, but what I cannot accept is not trying.
right,
So let that sink in. Everything we do in life, we have a choice. Okay, we have a choice. Unfortunately, in our head, there's two of us. There's the logical thinking Mark, and there's the emotional thinking Mark. Now, it's the emotional thinking primate that says to the human, "Oh, just go back to work. Just forget this Olympic, Paralympic dream. Just go back to work. Take the easy route."
right.
So you then have a choice. Do you listen?
Mm,
Okay. Or do you disagree? And do you say to the inner emotional voice, no, 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 no. I'm going to do this because I'm safe, because I'm okay. Okay. I've got a broken back. I'm disabled. I have lower leg paralysis, but I'm okay. I'm functional and I'm in control. And
right,
and that for me was the game changer when I made the decision and I knew that London 2012 was only going to happen once in my lifetime. It was not a rehearsal. It was only going to happen once. And I said to my parents, I'm going to do everything I can to be there. I just, honestly, Vibhor, I just wanted to get there. I just wanted to be part. I just wanted to experience the party.
you never thought
This-
of winning gold medal. You just wanted to
no,
get his. Oh
no,
wow, superb.
no, gosh, no. In the
Oh,
beginning, in June 2010, I just wanted to get there and be there.
right,
Okay. I didn't know I had the potential to almost rewrite the history books. And that goes back to the quote, okay, of I can accept failure, but what I cannot accept is not trying. Because if I didn't try, then technically I've already failed.
Right.
Let that one sink in.
That's very important. I think youngsters should learn this thing that you should never give up trying. That is the most important.
But
Gold
the
medal,
important,
that is a secondary thing, but never
yeah,
give up
yeah.
trying.
The important thing here is as a teenager, as a young adult, I didn't think about the extra voice in my head. I just
Yeah,
listened to it. When the voice says, "Oh, don't go cycling in the rain," I would say, "Okay, okay." Whereas now, I now say, "There's no such thing as bad weather, only
yeah,
a bad choice of clothing."
right. Very nice. Very,
So it's
very
it's
good way to
finding a solution. It's finding a solution to the problem, okay,
find
to
it.
adapt and overcome. This is important. Adapt and overcome.
Right. So people are always looking for excuses. So to deal with those excuses, you have to make right decision. It's all with you. That is your saying.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
So, Mark, you mentioned in many videos, I've seen some of your videos that your parents play a very incredible role in your life, in motivating you, not just after accident, even before accident. So, would you like to share with us that how your parents helped you, especially after accident? Uh,
Yeah, very much so. I think if we discuss my mum, first of all, um, my mum was a school caretaker for 20 years. So my
okay,
mum spent 20 years cleaning floors on her hands and knees. Okay.
okay,
For
okay.
for me, that's a hard working soul.
Yes,
Okay. She could have stood up. She could have used the mop, but
right,
she knew the mop could not do the job like a scrubbing brush.
right,
Okay. So it was just in my mum's values and character to do a great job, even just cleaning floors. My mum had pride in cleaning those floors, and they probably were the cleanest floors in Wales.
right,
Okay. Now, my dad was a crane driver, okay, for British Steel. My
okay,
dad spent 8 hours every day loading really heavy coils, steel coils onto lorries, okay?
okay,
Underneath those coils were people. So my dad had a really serious, responsible job because imagine trying to load 10-ton
uh,
coils, okay, when you're 100 feet in the air. So my dad had lots of patience, okay, very calm, just a very gentle soul. He was known as Mr. Nice Guy because he was. He was a true gent, you know. So why do I share that? I think I get my hard-working characteristic from my mum, okay? That's probably the side of me that I don't have a stop button.
not
And
even a
then my
pause button. Not
and
even a
then my
pause button.
and then my calmness,
Yes,
is my dad. So we miss them dearly. They passed a number of years ago now, and I'm so grateful for the upbringing, for the kindness, for the love, for the care, for the encouragement, that
superb.
they gave me. But at the same time, empathy when things didn't go according to plan, you know. And I'll never forget, and I'll share this with you and the audience. I'll never forget the night I broke my back. I'm lying in the hospital bed, totally paralyzed, and my mum is crying. You can imagine. My mum is crying just profusely. So she's crying, I'm crying, just uncontrollably. And my dad leaned over to me and he said to me, "I told you, didn't I? Told you to be careful." And I said to my dad, "Please, now is not the time. Okay? Now is not the time to have a go at me. You know, just
Yeah,
leave it for another day." But I think it was because he cared,
yes,
just seeing his only son, his only sibling, lying in his hospital bed, knowing that I'd participated in sport, gosh, for probably around 25 years at that point. Since I was 15, I was playing rugby, football, cricket, swimming, just heavily into sport. And I genuinely mean this, that it was my fitness that saved my life that afternoon when I had my accident. So yeah, we miss my parents dearly.
Great parents, really great parents. The kind of values you have, it's because of now I understand because I was very curious to know about your background that
Yeah.
what made you that kind of guy and that it's such a severe injury and after that you recovered so fast physically as well as mentally and then you won medals. Wow, it was simply amazing and very rare, Mark. Believe me, very rare. I've never seen such a guy that who recovered so fast and made a decision to start a
Mm.
new career and then won everything in life,
And I
the
think I
biggest
think I
events.
think what's really important for your audience, okay, is to evaluate the situation and ask yourself the question, am I safe? Okay? Am I safe? Am I okay? Okay. I was severely disabled, but when I step onto the bike and I clip in my cycling shoes, okay, I get the feeling that it doesn't feel like I'm disabled because when I'm walking, obviously walking for me is quite difficult because only half the muscles work. But when I'm
Okay,
cycling, it's the cycling muscles that do work, which
okay,
which are the which are the sort of 40%, 50% that do work.
okay.
And that for me was a lifeline because what
Nice.
I was what I was able to do was focus on what I can do and not worry about what I can't do. Okay? I can't run anymore. I can't skip anymore. I can't rock climb anymore. I can't do lots of the things that I used to do. But what I can do is I can cycle. I can actually row, believe it or not. I can use the indoor rowing machine. Okay? So I
Okay,
was grateful to focus on what I could do, not what I couldn't do, you know?
okay. So you shift your focus from many things to single in cycling because now it was completely like you wanted to do this thing and your muscles were helping in some way. That's
Yeah, yeah.
great. Yeah. So, Mark, I'm very curious to know about your preparation, that how you prepared yourself mentally, physically to win that gold medal. What was your routine? What are you doing? What kind of habits you build, especially new habits, new
Yeah, yeah.
hobbies? What kind
Yeah.
of system you followed? I'm
I
definitely
think,
know that you followed some system. You created some system and you followed
yeah,
that system at your home as well as in the stadium. What you did
yeah. I
exactly?
think and that's a really great question, actually. I think the first thing to think about for any human being, okay, going through any kind of process is thinking about how much time do I have, okay? Because when they announced that London had the Olympics and Paralympics, the clock was ticking, okay? The clock was ticking.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, life is exactly the same. The clock is ticking. It's only when you sit down and you evaluate how much time do I have left, okay? Not necessarily what you want to do, but how much time have I got left to do what I want to do? Okay? Most people, in my opinion, same again, most people don't start living until they get to about 50 because it's that number where they go, oh, hang on, I could be halfway through my life. Okay?
Yeah.
Then the panic sets in.
Self-realization that happens that.
Okay? For me, that moment, what we
Yeah.
call a pattern interrupt in
Yes.
coaching, was my accident. Okay?
Yeah.
Because I was just, as I said, I was just going through life, just enjoying, having
Following
a
life.
nice time,
Yes.
working hard, training hard, okay? But that accident made me realize that I was almost halfway through my life, okay? And the clock was ticking.
Right.
Then the realization that London 2012, the Olympics, was only going to happen once, and it was 2.5 years away. So now I kept thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I may not have enough time to get fit enough, strong enough, and fast enough to even get selected. So
Yeah.
I had a choice. And this is something I'd love to teach people, okay? Is the art of acceptance, but also the art of compromise, okay? The art of compromise. There was no way that I would be able to train part-time to maybe get selected for the Olympics. It wouldn't happen. And I was conscious of this. So that's why I gave up my job. Okay. I was living back with my parents. And
Okay.
I said to my parents, I need to train every day. Okay. I just need your support. And my, and my late father said, yes, but you're also going to eat our food as well. And I said, well, as long as you're willing to feed me, house me, okay, and support me, that's all I ask. Okay. That's all I ask. And that's all I needed, you know, because then when the decision was made to train full time,
Yeah.
that's when my cycling coach made the phone call to British Cycling and said, look, I've found this guy. He's broke his back. He's got lower leg paralysis, but he's got a big engine. I mean, he's got huge lungs and he
Oh.
doesn't have a stop button. So probably within about 8 months, of doing lots of training, lots of compromise. That's when British Cycling said, "Okay, we'll give you an opportunity. Okay, we'll give you an opportunity." And honestly, Vibhor, that's all I needed was the opportunity. So, what's the point to your audience? The point to your audience is this: you have to accept compromise if you want to achieve something, whatever that is in life.
Yeah.
Okay. But also, the most important thing that I learned at British Cycling was the art of acceptance. So, what does that mean? What that means is this: imagine training for 2 or 3 years and winning nothing.
Right.
How do you accept that and move on with your life? Okay. But for many people who are professional athletes, they could have a 10-year career and never win anything.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay.
So many
You know?
Olympians and so many Paralympians who never won a medal to
So,
participate.
and that's why it's so important to enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
Okay. Enjoy the journey because to answer your question from earlier on, I just wanted to get there. I just wanted to be there, you know? So if I won a medal, great. If I didn't win a medal, I was okay with that.
Yeah. So when did you realize that you can win gold medal when you were participating in that event and about breaking those two records, world
That
records?
that's that's an even better question, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
I would say, excuse me, I would probably say I joined British Cycling in 2000 or May 2011, and probably within 6 months,
Okay.
my improvements, my speed, all of my capacity just improved.
Okay.
Okay. And then going into the winter of 2011, my coach said to me, we need to do some testing on the track just to see, where you are physically and mentally. And I was only 1.5 seconds off the world record. So my
Oh,
coach suddenly said to me, do you realize that you have the potential that in 12 months' time, because remember the Olympics were 12 months away,
okay.
that you could be riding under world record pace. Now imagine what that did for me. Okay. My self-confidence went through the roof. My
Boosted up.
self-belief just almost it just felt incredible. because I knew I still had 12 months to go, 12 months more training, 12 months more racing, you know? So that's when I suddenly realized that there could be something special in this, you know?
That's superb. And what was your Mark, your routine? How many hours you daily practice? Um, what was your lifestyle, kind of food you were eating, and what kind of
Yeah.
like sleeping
So
and all these things?
so people understand that being a professional athlete is not easy. And I respect that, okay?
Yeah,
Because probably since I was 10, I wanted to be a professional athlete because I used to watch the Olympics on the TV. I wanted to emulate all these incredible athletes, you know. And what I found after 3 months, it was almost like a cycling prison, okay? You wake up the same time every morning,
yeah,
same breakfast at the same time every morning. You drink the same amount of fluid every day, okay? You're around the same people in terms of coaches and athletes every day. You're in the same environment every day. 9 times out of 10, it's the same weather every day. And it gets to the point where you almost start to feel like this hamster on a hamster wheel, okay? Because nothing changes. But
yeah.
where British Cycling are very clever is that every 8 weeks they take you out of the environment, okay, and you go and train somewhere else, okay.
Okay.
You could then maybe go and train with a local team, a local cycling club, for instance, okay. But you have to break that momentum, otherwise you go crazy, okay.
Yeah,
The
means
only
every
the, The only thing that's saving you psychologically is knowing that the clock is ticking and you're 1 day closer or 1 week closer or 1 month closer to the Olympics. Okay.
right.
So to answer your second question, food, porridge or oats, banana, honey for breakfast, you know, and then we'd probably do maybe the first ride of the day is probably 80 kilometers. Okay. And then you come home and maybe have some salmon and then some vegetables or maybe salad, okay? And then shower. Then you normally have a sleep for maybe 30 minutes just to let the body recover because that's when the body produces growth hormone. And then you just maybe have a small espresso, for instance, and then an hour and a half later, you're back on the bike to do another 80 kilometers.
Yeah,
So my point is when I say it was a cycling prison, I mean it was it felt like a cycling prison, but a good time, a good experience.
yeah. And that's I think that's what make difference between great and good. You can say that people it's all about practice, what you're doing, because practice is boring and performance is exciting. Like
Yes, yes.
we
And we
see
used to
that
have a
because
great
audience want to see your performance. They are not
yes,
bothered about your practice because it's boring. But practice is
yeah,
actually where you make a difference.
very true. And we used to have a great saying that training should be hard and racing should be easy.
Yeah.
And it's very
Right.
true,
Yeah.
very
So,
true.
Mark, because you are a cyclist, so what is the difference between good cyclist and great cyclist? For practice, you mentioned about it, that prison that you were following, that you kind of
Mm.
diet and exercise and all activities. So, what other things makes a great cyclist?
Yeah, I think there's probably three answers. Okay.
Okay.
The first answer is to make sure that you do the work off the bike so it helps you on the bike. So eating the right food,
Hmm.
obviously, the right fuel, drinking, enough water, so you're obviously hydrated. But the other second answer is timing. Okay. So what I learned at British Cycling was not only what to eat and how much to eat, but when to eat. Because you have to allow the food to be absorbed by the body. You have to let it digest. So
Right.
that was definitely a great piece of education that I learned, you know. And one of the most important things I learned was rest. Honestly, believe it or not, even though we trained 26, 28 hours a week, we probably rested for 28 hours a week. Because when you exercise and you rest, off the bike, that's when the magic happens. That's
Okay,
when the body repairs at a cellular level. That's when you become really fit. You don't become fit on the bike. You become fit when you rest and recover, you know?
okay, great, great. So, Mark, tell us about your because you're a cycling coach. You're living in Dubai. For how long you're living in Dubai?
So I moved to Dubai April 2022. So 3 years this month, actually.
Yes, this month. That's great.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
tell us about your. Okay,
And I moved here for my health because of my spinal cord issues. Obviously,
okay.
the 9 or 10 months of warm weather here in Dubai really helps me, you know.
That is the reason that's why you moved here.
Mm.
Okay. Now it's okay with you, the season, the weather, everything. Now it's okay.
Well, I still have I still have my disability, obviously,
Yeah.
because the disability isn't going anywhere.
Hmm.
Okay. I still cycle about 250, 260 kilometers a week, and I'm coaching, people within that time frame as well. And and yeah, I just feel, from a health perspective, in a good place. And,
Hmm.
I've said this many times. I may have said this to you when we spoke originally, that I
Hmm.
didn't win my gold medal with great luck. I won it with great health, you know, and that was,
Right.
yeah, that was definitely the catalyst for me.
So tell us about your coaching sessions that you run in Dubai, your team building sessions and cycling coachings particularly.
Yeah, so when I moved to Dubai, there's a great amount of people here who love cycling, thousands of cyclists. And what I wanted to do was to give back as part of my Olympic legacy to teach, regular cyclists, not professionals, just regular cyclists who really enjoy, the low impact sport of cycling and teach them, skills that some people think they're just, what's the right word? They're different, but when you create the neurological pathway and you create those habits, then these riders can really start to enjoy, the wonderful sport of cycling, you know. So I coach up to sort of 10, 12, sometimes 16 people
Oh,
at a time,
at the same time.
So
Okay.
it's a great skill that I suppose I've acquired, as a coach. Um, and then obviously some days, we just ride as a group and yeah, it's good. I really enjoy that space, as I said, because I don't feel disabled, when I'm cycling, you know.
And how much time generally it takes to prepare them for some big competition?
Yeah, so we have a ride here in Dubai every year in February, which is a
Okay.
95 kilometer. It's technically not a race, but there's 2,500 people who think it's a race.
Okay.
So we train regularly for that. 10 hours a week. Tuesday night and a Thursday night, and then on a Saturday morning. So, so yeah, everybody's learning the skills that technically win, Olympic gold medals, you know, and most of the skills are technical skills on
Okay.
how to, ride the bike correctly, even down to how to breathe correctly. And
Oh,
most people are like, really? But you have to breathe slowly through your mouth. You have to be calm. And when you're calm, the body's relaxed,
yeah.
you know? So, so yeah, I really enjoy sharing, everything I learned.
That's great, Mark. So how do you integrate mindset coaching into your physical training sessions?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, as I said earlier on, is the work that people have to do off the bike, to
Mm,
enjoy their time on the bike. Okay. And, even though we don't do crazy speeds, understandably, people are going to get tired, after 1.5 to 2 hours, So it's teaching the members that I have about that voice in your head because we all have it. It's been with us all our life. In fact, it was probably there before we were born, you know.
Right.
And how do you manage it? Because you can't get rid of it, okay?
Yeah.
How do you manage it? So the sports psychologist that we all worked with at British Cycling is a wonderful gentleman called Professor Steve Peters. And Professor Peters wrote an amazing book called The Chimp Paradox. And it's all
Okay.
about that voice in your head. It's all about the different levels of how this voice is 5 times more powerful than the human. So imagine, this catastrophic voice that just goes off in your head when you least expect it,
Right.
you know, and you can't stop it, but what you can do is manage it,
Manage it.
okay? And and that's something that I teach and I coach, the riders, and it's a great insight for them, as well. And certainly, with the executive coaching that I do as well, um, when you tell these leaders who are running multinational companies that in their head there's two of them. So
That's
yeah,
great. So how do you coach people to develop their resilience? Because you are having tremendous resilience and you are having a champion mindset. So how
yeah,
do you
yeah,
transfer that kind of your attitude in these people?
yeah. I think first of all, it's awareness. Okay, it's
Okay.
awareness of how does your body work? Because most people know how their car works. Most people
Yes.
know how their laptop works. But do you really know how your body works? And not only just your body, but your mind as well.
Right.
Okay, because the mind is such a powerful machine that it can totally confuse you with the environment that you're in. Okay,
Right.
so when the body starts to hurt through cycling, the inner voice, the primate voice, the emotional voice says to Vibhor, stop. This is painful. Stop. And what does Vibhor do? Say, okay. And it's almost like you're listening to a teacher, okay?
Right. Right.
Or or a parent. So if the voice says, stop doing this because it's painful, it's almost like your parent says to you, don't do that because you'll hurt yourself. So what do? You listen, okay? And you say, okay, but how do you override the voice? Okay? How do you ride through the pain barrier? How do you focus on the process, okay? And think logically, not emotionally. So just let that one sink in because most people, they're like, really? Yeah, but it hurts. I know. But if you're safe, it's okay. And it's the same in life. When you think logically about whatever you want to achieve in life, if you're safe, okay, and you're in no danger, then you can just push through.
Right. Great, Mark. So, Mark, because you talk about peak performance, so how an average man, like not sports person, you talk about that great mental technique that to stop listening your inner voice if it is not helping you in growing. Okay, and just to manage that voice because you can't stop it, but you can manage it. Okay, so what it means that peak performance achieving peak performance in a daily life for an corporate guy because you are dealing with corporate clients. So how a CEO or any CXO can achieve peak performance
Yeah,
in his career as well as in personal life.
yeah. There's one word, honesty.
Okay.
Okay. Honesty. Now, What does that really mean? Because you and I think of honesty as telling other people the truth. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. What about honesty to yourself? Okay. Because of this reason, and I studied psychology a long, long time ago. Okay. You can lie to your friends. You can lie to your family. You can even try and lie to your dog, but never try and lie to yourself. Because if you think of people when they dream big, okay, they can talk themselves out of it, but it's not them that's doing the talking, it's the inner voice, because the inner voice is trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
If the inner voice is concerned or worried, it'll shout, okay, don't do it. Okay. But if you know that you're safe, you're in no danger, you have the attributes to achieve what you want to achieve, what's stopping you? The only thing that's stopping you is the feeling of regret if you fail. Okay? As
Yeah.
human beings, I love this quote. As human beings, we do not like the unknown.
Right.
Okay? Speak to people who don't like the dark. Okay? The dark isn't the fear. The fear is what's in the dark. What's
Right.
in the darkness. So my point is, we don't like going into the unknown because we know that there is something beyond what we see. Okay? Which is why most animals will just walk into a dark forest or a dark space because they're not educated by science that there is something called the unknown. So what's my point? My point is that the human brain has this space of unknown. Okay? That's where regret lives. But if we're honest with ourselves and we go through the process giving 100%, then this goes back to Professor Peters. You have to learn the art of acceptance. Because think about this. When you race professionally, you can't race professionally giving 99% effort and expect to win. Okay? You may win the race, but you've lied to yourself. So in other words, you've faked it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So as a professional athlete, you get used to giving 100% in everything you do, not 110%, because that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
105% or even 101%. It doesn't exist. What does exist is giving your best, which is only 100%.
Right.
Okay? What's the downside? Well, there's a question for you. Was I early on this podcast? Probably by 3 or 4 minutes,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
But my point is that I thought logically where I needed to be with my machine on, lights on, dialing in on time. Okay? That's given 100% in the process.
Right.
Okay? So there is no regrets. And that's something that I've learned from my time as an athlete to then bring it into my life now, okay, is that logical thinking process to never have regret.
Never
So,
have regret.
so when there's no regret, my chimp is always silent.
Your inner voice. This is how you deal with your inner voice. That's great.
Keep the chimp quiet.
Keep the chip quiet. That's great, Mark. So, Mark, because of your great achievements, you were awarded MBE. In which year?
So that was May 2013.
So, so how your life changed after that because you were awarded MBE. So that was a great
Yeah.
achievement. So
It's it, how can I explain this just briefly for your audience? When you train professionally for the Olympics, You train for a specific time, which was, the 31st of August, 2012. Okay.
Yeah.
You're representing your country because you want to, not for financial gain, because it wasn't about the money. It was about achieving something that would put me in the history books because nobody can take that away from you.
Yeah.
Okay. And I suppose possessions such as a house or a car, people can take those away from you. Okay. Money, people can take money from you. But when you're part of history, that's set in stone. And when I realized how much potential I had, I knew that I was going to give the process 100%. I was going to give the race 100%. And whatever happened after that, I was ready to accept it. Okay. I'd already had that conversation with myself, which is the transparency about being honest with me. Okay. And when I received the letter, from Buckingham Palace to say that I'd been awarded the MBE, the Member of the British Empire, which basically is a gift given from the country, to say thank you, for your achievements in sport, representing your country. Now, you can't train for that. Okay. You can't train for that. So that was just something that just made me immensely proud that I was recognized, not necessarily for maybe just the race, but the 3 years of blood, sweat, and tears to
Yeah.
get there, to
Okay.
then achieve, the accolade of the gold medal.
What was your feeling when you won that gold medal? What were you thinking that time exactly? Before
I
just
suppose,
starting that race and after just winning that race, what were you thinking?
yeah, the first feeling was the feeling of relief. Okay, when the race was over, it was the feeling of it's over, it's done.
Job
Okay,
done.
job done, for
Yeah.
instance. Okay, and to break two world records in one day was just unbelievable. Okay,
Yeah.
but
Completely unbelievable.
my point is, I gave 100% in the second race, like I gave 100% in the first race. Now, the difference between race number one and race number two was less than 100th of a second. That's literally the blink of an eye.
Less
So that
than 100 of a second. Oh
one
wow.
hundredth of a second.
Oh.
Okay. Honestly, it's literally, the click of a finger.
Yeah.
And what
Right.
that proved to me was that the race in the morning and then the race 4 hours later was identical. I mean, literally copy and paste.
Everything
Okay.
same. Environment same. Everything same. Right. All
The
things parameters same.
performance,
Yeah.
everything was the same. Okay.
Yeah.
So what that proved was that British cycling are perfectionists when it comes to getting athletes ready, for that specific day, just that one day, you know. So it was a great memory to stand on the podium and have the gold medal, placed around my neck. And I'd probably been thinking about it, visualizing it, dreaming about it for probably 30 years, you know, and and it didn't sink in for maybe 2 or 3 months. Because remember, and you know this, the body and the brain is still in that habitual state
Right.
till somebody presses the pause button and then you reflect. And then you start asking people, did it really happen?
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
So you are in the
so,
kind of inertia and something happened and so it's again and you were like completely like, oh,
so I brought this along to
wow,
show you and the audience,
so
which,
nice.
as I said, it was literally a childhood dream in a box,
Wow.
you know. Um, And my point, and I mean this, when you're part of history, okay, you have almost I suppose, a position of responsibility.
Right.
Okay. And the position of responsibility is twofold because of, being awarded the MBE. So the tagline for the Olympics and Paralympics was to inspire the next generation. And
Right.
even now, 12, 13, nearly 13 years on, 12 years on, I'm still inspiring the next generation. I don't have to. We don't have to do this podcast, but I want to. And that's the difference. Okay. Which leads me back to giving 100%.
Giving 100%. That's so nice, Mark. So, Mark, you are now an executive coach. You are a public speaker, conference speaker. You are a cycling coach. How you are managing all these things along with your personal life? How you are
Well,
dividing your time?
yeah, the great thing is, Vibhor, I don't have a TV.
Yeah, you mentioned it. It was superb that you mentioned that you have not watched TV for the last 8 years. So,
8 years. Yes, yes.
superb.
Honestly, I listen to music. Okay. I
Okay.
find that music relaxes me. Okay. And I suppose life for me now is doing the three or four verticals that I really enjoy. Okay. I really enjoy. So it's almost like I suppose Dubai for me is like a self-development program. Okay.
Okay.
With the three or four, businesses that I have, doing what I really enjoy. If I didn't enjoy them, I wouldn't be doing them.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't, And as a company, we're just about to import the world's first isotonic alkaline drink, which is a sports drink, a sports beverage, and it's pure fruit juice, coconut water, and seawater.
Yeah, you mentioned about it, that nutrients and minerals.
Honestly,
Yeah.
it's got
Just,
78 electrolytes in it, and it's all natural and organic. Okay.
wow.
So I would have never had this opportunity, to almost fall in love, with this incredible product that is going to be giving people back their health. Because people in the UAE, people in the Middle East, they don't realize they're dehydrated. They don't. They
Okay.
don't. Because they
Yeah.
just they just get on with their life, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, it's been a great opportunity, as you said, as an executive coach, as a cycling coach, as a conference speaker, you know, speaking on resilience, discipline, peak performance. Um, and obviously now with, the food and beverage opportunity with a company called Refix from Spain, it's just a great opportunity to give back, you know.
That's really very nice, Mark. So, Mark, what advice would you like to give to someone who is going through a traumatic event, who has some accident happened or something happened in his life, in his or her life, and he's a little bit, you can say, lost what to
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
What advice would you like to give to them?
I think there's maybe two or three pieces of advice because one piece of advice is, first of all, is never enough. Okay, because one piece of advice doesn't fit all. And I think the first thing that I would say is whatever you want to achieve, okay, if it's been done before, just repeat the process, but just do it better. So in other words, do what's been done, but just do it better. Okay. The second thing is to try not to do it alone. When I was with British Cycling, I had six coaches. Okay.
Okay.
Six experts who were incredibly astute at what they did. Okay. I may have said this to you when we spoke originally. I was
Yeah.
not born a world or Paralympic champion. I wasn't. I had to become that person. I had to be coachable.
Yeah.
Okay. I had to learn from the best physiologist, biomechanic, nutritionist, strength coach, psychologist. Those people coached me to be that person
Yeah.
for the Olympics. So I'm so grateful. So my point is to your audience, reach out, okay, and have support. Find people who are better than you at doing what they do.
Right.
Because I was not the expert,
Yeah.
okay? I was not the expert of nutrition or strength training or physiology or biomechanics. I wasn't. But what I had was the attributes to put all those pieces together to ride the bike, you know, and ride the bike in a way that I always said, how can we make the bike go faster? I kept questioning, how can I make it go faster? What can I do? Who can I speak to? You know? So it's knowing that you're not the finished article. We're
Yeah.
always metamorphosizing as people, but reach out and learn from other people, you know?
Oh,
So hopefully that answers your question.
yeah, definitely. Like you have to always seek experts' help and take advice. Don't take it like on ego. Everything you can't be good at. So you have to
Yes,
learn from
very true.
others, great
Yeah,
masters who are better
yeah.
than
And
you.
I think the certainly the one piece of advice just to finish as we bring the podcast to a close is be patient. Okay?
Yeah,
Be patient because all good things take time,
take time.
you know? Just be patient. Yeah.
Any your favorite books that you would like to recommend that helped
I
you?
think there's
I
yeah, there's
mentioned about
two.
one book. Any other
Yeah,
book?
yeah. There's one book, obviously that we spoke about, the chimp paradox.
Yeah,
Okay. And there's a really small, easy read book called Who Moved My Cheese?
yeah,
Who Moved My Cheese? And that's great because that teaches people patience.
yeah. Right.
Simple read. You could probably read it in 4 hours, Um, so yeah, but thank you. Thank you for everything. It's been wonderful.
One last question, Mark. If you get a chance to go back in 2009, you just met an accident. What would you like to say to yourself?
I think there's two answers in there because people think or people want to ask, would you go back and do it all again? Okay. Knowing what I know now, 100%. I would go through everything I've gone through, the trauma, the heartache, the loss, you know, through the bereavement of my dad, even losing friends along the way, you know. But I think going back and talking to myself. So if I was stood by my bedside that night, instead of my dad, and I'm having that conversation with myself, okay,
Yeah,
I suppose the thought of what was ahead of me in terms of the trauma, the psychological trauma, the mental health trauma, the physical trauma, you know, I probably I probably would have given myself the same advice as what my dad gave me. Because my dad said to me quite openly, you're going to get through this. Okay. You're going to get through this because you're a winner. So think about being that winner.
yeah.
Okay. Think about being that winner. Be that person. Who do you need to be to get to where you want to be? So I'll leave you with that thought.
That's great, Mark. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing your insight, for sharing your experience, sharing your story. Wonderful, wonderful story. And the most important thing is your life is a completely like I can say that it's a school, it's an education. That what you have
Much so.
done in your life, especially after meeting that accident, uh, those incredible 4 or 5 years, and after that, what you're doing, what you're giving back to the society. Amazing. It's really amazing. If somebody wants to contact you for personal or professional help, So I know you are having a website. You are having a YouTube channel.
So
Uh,
I've never well, there is a small amount of videos on the YouTube channel, but I've
Okay.
never, I suppose,
Any other social media? I know you're in on LinkedIn and
yeah,
so
Instagram
Instagram.
as well,
Okay.
at Mark Colbourne MBE, and obviously the website,
And
markcolbourne.com.
if you would like to mention your email address,
But the actual email format is on the website. So there's a
okay,
capture page so people can send an email through, so
okay,
we'll obviously take any questions or any inquiries.
that's great. That's great, Mark. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Mark. It was
My
really an
pleasure.
honor to have you on my podcast, and I learned so many things from you. A great
Good. Well,
champion,
take
true
care,
champion.
everybody. And good luck to everybody. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Wish you also
Bye.
best of luck. Thank you. Bye, Mark. A massive thank you to Robin Tarr for joining us and sharing such a powerful story of strength, purpose, and perseverance. From navigating the toughest of life's challenges to reaching the pinnacle of sport and giving back as a mentor and leader, Robin, you truly are a testament to the human spirit. If his story moved you, as it did us, be sure to check out his keynote talks and school outreach work. Until next time, take care and stay inspired.